What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. That's me. With me, as always, super producer Brandon Newman, my father, Mike Golick Sr. Dad, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderfully, Mike. Just wonderfully. We have all kind of great sports stories going on now, especially in the NBA after the U.S. Open finish at the LA Country Club. I know you were there, I think, on Thursday. And from everybody's reaction to it, hoping that it will never, ever, 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 ever be at the LA Country Club again.
You know how wild it is and how bad you've got to be to unite basically the entire world of golf right now? Like, one of the most fractured sports that we have, embroiled in a controversy around the merger between LIV and the PGA and all these warring factions. And LA Country Club was such an affront to everyone's good time at the US Open. They have somehow gotten everybody on the same page. Dad, I'm almost impressed.
It's amazing. Waiting to hear of the drama. Now, again, we had never seen publicly on the golf course, LIV players and PGA players like Rory McIlroy and Brooks Koepka walking down the fairway talking. Everybody wants a steel cage match. You weren't getting that. But you're right. Everybody was united on the fact that the fairways were too wide, a problem I'd like to have every single time I like to go on the golf course. Have someone say the fairways are you almost can't miss them, but the rough was ridiculous. And then the whole fan thing about they only had about 20,000, available each day, and the members were buying up tickets and yada, yada, yada. And just would it be the uppityness of that club? It sounds like a real thrill of a club to be a part of, right? That they just sit there and old from the steps, on everything you do. Don't have your shirt like that. Don't wear your hair like that. Don't stand over there. They seem like a real winning group over there.
Yeah, the sign says long-haired freaky people need not
Yeah.
apply, apparently. So after that adventure at LA Country Club, rest assured, I doubt anyone's going to have to worry about that for a good long while here. I do appreciate y'all's merch shop, though, and I'll be walking around repping LA Country Club for the foreseeable future here. We got a great show for you guys today, though. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel as well as DraftKingsNetwork.com and Samsung TV Plus live 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern there. Bud Elliott from 24/7 Sports, recruiting analyst over there, also part of the Cover 3 podcast. Going to join us to talk a little Elite 11, Dad. The top quarterback prospects in high school are out in El Segundo, not far from where I live, slinging the rock around. So we're going to get a little read on how some of those guys did, some curious words from Nick Saban, and a look towards college football season, since we're always excited for that. But Dad, you mentioned the NBA went sort of crazy this weekend. Like, we have got a smorgasbord of NBA headlines to get to this morning here, and thankfully none of them have to do with Ja Morant yet. But Dad, over the weekend we had the Phoenix Suns start shooting their shot again. They set to finalize a trade that would send all Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, several second-round picks, and a pick swap to the Washington Wizards in exchange for all-star guard Bradley Beal. Dad, Bradley Beal had the only no-trade clause in the NBA at the moment, which drove down the price a lot in this situation. But my God, what an absolute wash. The Wizards are a deeply unserious basketball franchise and continue to get taken out behind the cleaners. This is one of the most embarrassingly lopsided trades we've seen in a while. Even if it needed to happen, even if this was probably a long time coming, and even if it was the old regime that gave him that no-trade clause, it's still on paper as one of the more embarrassingly lopsided moves we'll see in quite some time.
It's amazing that nobody would get the answer to that question if you just asked a while ago who was the only NBA player without a no trade clause. I don't think Bradley Beal is going to be the top of anybody's head on that one. So that was a bit of a stunner. Now, it certainly makes for an interesting team there with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. There are those analysts that have immediately made them the best team in the West. I certainly would not go that far. Let's see Kevin Durant play a full season, and let's see what kind of support group that they can have, after getting Kevin Durant and what they had to give up. And now the same here, is it going to be the 3 stars and who else can you get, to kind of fill in the slots. But, this is one of those that has a domino effect. Chris Paul found out about the trade from his son And he thinks Isaiah Thomas, who is a good friend with Matt Ishbia, the new owner of the Suns, had a lot to do with this trade. And he said, listen, he wasn't bitter about it. He said it's business. It's the way it goes. And then he'll see what kind of option he has. The Wizards half-heartedly saying maybe they'll sign Chris Paul, to a deal, which isn't going to happen. They'll either buy him out or trade him to another team. I don't see any way Chris Paul is playing for Washington this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Chris Paul's feelings. This was him on Good Morning America. Chris Paul had been flying to New York to promote his new book that's coming out, and instead ended up sitting across from Michael Strahan having to answer questions like this.
I'm driving in this morning, and we got the ticker tape thing outside of our building.
What did it say?
And I see this potential blockbuster deal between you and Bradley Beal that may take you from Phoenix to Washington and vice versa. I was surprised. What are your first thoughts on that?
I was surprised too. I found out on the plane yesterday flying here for this. In this league, anything can happen, so you just figure out what's next.
You literally found out on the plane?
Absolutely.
Wow. What was your first reaction?
Don't push him any further. He's trying to be nice about it.
Yeah, he is, right?
Yeah. What's happening?
Michael, what are you doing? Push him further. Get the sound bite.
Yeah.
You know how to do this. Come on, man.
Yeah, I thought he
would
go a little further there.
I did too, but Dad, to be honest, the Chris Paul part of this is really the least interesting part to me. It got the most pub because Chris was out in public talking about this. But like you said, it sounds like if they're going to trade him, it would be to Los Angeles. And Chris Paul, who went out to Arizona in the first place because he wanted to be closer around his family, it sounds like would either end up there, or if Washington can't find a trade partner and they waive him, it sounds like then the Lakers, who we'd imagine, and it was long rumored he might go and sign with his buddy LeBron James. But either way, Dad, we're past the best Chris Paul years. I think this postseason and this season run, it became clear that the guy who was an incredibly integral part of that Phoenix run to the finals against Milwaukee a few years ago, who was the adult in that room in a backcourt that featured Devin Booker as he ascended to star status, that's not the Chris Paul that we have anymore. Obviously, injuries always a part of the equation with him, but I think now we'd seen the skills atrophy enough to where he's not going to be the main piece on a championship player. He might be a great accent. He's going to be a guy that can certainly help you from a leadership standpoint, but overall, his basketball days of really affecting the bottom line of a team, I think, are probably done at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, comparing these two, obviously, I think Beal at the point where he could probably help this team more, especially, in the playoffs. So Chris Paul's going through some nicks there, and hasn't been available all the time. So I think this puts him in a better spot as long as everybody is healthy. But I still say, what kind of supporting cast will you have? Now, they're not overrun by a tax bill like, say, Golden State or some other teams just yet. So maybe they can still get some pieces around them.
They might, that's like, I imagine DeAndre Ayton's got to get moved at this point, right? Like, you need to fill out your depth somehow on this team, and moving DeAndre Ayton for a few more players that might be able to help fill that role probably feels like it's inevitable at this point. But Dad, everyone's going to point to what you talked about. Are they going to be the favorites or not? They shouldn't be. Denver should be the favorites until further notice. But if you're looking on the bright side with the Suns, your issue this last year was you traded for Kevin Durant. You were a top-heavy team, but most importantly, Kevin Durant coming off of injury and going in and integrating with your team on short notice here. In the best version of this, you're going to now have a full season for everybody to play together. You're going to have this thing with time to actually get to know each other, learn how all the parts work. The part that is worrisome is Bradley Beal hasn't played more than 60 games since 2018-2019 season. Kevin Durant's had injuries in the last few years, and you don't have a real true point guard on the roster at this point. So there's a bunch of things you need to worry about, but you got as much firepower as any if these guys are actually healthy and firing on all cylinders. So this kind of, Dad, becomes like a bit of the Brooklyn Nets big three from a few years ago with Kevin Durant, oddly enough. I'd be curious on that end, Dad. People did the list of Kevin Durant's teammates over the recent number of years and the super teams he's formed. Does that have any effect on the way that you view Kevin Durant in this entire prism of how many different superstar-laden teams he's forced his way onto and orchestrated?
Well, again, in this day and age of the NBA, name me an NBA team that has won it with just one superstar. Just one. Nowadays you need at least two, and why everybody gets upset is because the players are starting to dictate where they go and not just the teams. When the teams traded and made super teams, years ago, it was fine because the teams did it, but God forbid the players have a voice in it and try and manipulate it themselves. It doesn't do anything, as far as I'm concerned. I know there are those like our buddy Stu Gatz that won't recognize Kevin Durant's championships. Kevin Durant will go down as one of the greatest basketball players to ever play. And, he's a guy that there are those like Dame Lillard, we'll see if it stays like that says, I want to stay with one team and I want to win here, that being Portland. We'll see if that time is really up on that. But he has stayed there. Or you have guys like Kevin Durant who have bopped around. It doesn't bug me like it bugs other people. This is a different era. And I'm not getting into guys in this era couldn't play in the older era. I'm not saying that at all. I think that's a ridiculous conversation to have, in my opinion. But guys go about it differently now because they have a little more power in where they want to move and what they want to do. So he'll go down as one of the greats, and I absolutely acknowledge his rings, that he is a champion. But I understand how some say he's just moving around, trying to move around to the next great team to get a ring. But hey, if I hadn't had a ring, man, and I had that ability, I'd be trying to get one as well.
We always do the eras comment with LeBron James, but putting a 7-footer with handles in a shooting range like Kevin Durant in the 70s would be like handing a person on the Titanic a cell phone. I would pay pay-per-view prices to see their face. I will say, Dad, because these are all going to be connected, but kind of putting a bow on the situation with Phoenix and Bradley Beal. It's been a few years. Injuries have been a big part of why that we've seen him play at an all-NBA level. And honestly, who could blame him in Washington where, if a tree falls in the woods and they're playing for the Washington Wizards, does anyone care or hear about it at this point? I'd imagine being around this group, we're going to get the best version of Bradley Beal that's still left possible. There is part of me that appreciates Matt Ishbia and the Suns trying to go at it as hard as they do, considering like what we talked about with Michael Jordan the other day. You don't actually have to try or do well for these franchises to increase in value and be a great asset in your portfolio. So Matt Ishbia, who obviously played for Tom Izzo, has that background, coming in and throwing haymakers right away. It's a strategy we saw at the forefront of the culture war in last year's playoffs, where you have the Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics, these homegrown teams making their way through, going up against teams like the Lakers that had remade themselves at the trade deadline, or the Suns that had traded for Kevin Durant in the middle of this season. And we're going to see how far this can go. Again, this has a lot to me in my mind of similarities with that Brooklyn Nets squad that Kevin Durant was a part of, where they came together for that one season and, were it not for injuries, looked like they were going to mow through everybody. We'll see if they can find defense or a bench, but they've certainly got high firepower that I am excited to watch.
Yeah, the Brooklyn Nets went from, super team to the most underachieving super team put together in the history of super teams being put together. And I don't think Phoenix would ever want to be, compared to something like that. But you got one of the major players of that in Kevin Durant. And once you traded for Kevin Durant, it was twofold. One, that means you're going for it. And two, it means you're on the clock, because you don't know how long you're going to have Kevin Durant. The guy bops around a bit.
I would say you have a lot better chance of retaining him because Kyrie Irving is not here this time around. Like, that seemed to be the time bomb for everyone last time in Brooklyn. Now, you're right. Kevin Durant's certainly been nomadic. He's got his own history with that, but it does seem a lot less tied to any sort of like tangible drama than when Kyrie's on the team with you.
Well, there's the drama, and then there's the not winning. Kevin Durant bops around to these teams to win championships, not to just see different cities. So if Phoenix all of a sudden isn't winning, he may say, okay, it's not working here. As I'm getting up there in age, let me try somewhere else. So that's why you're on the clock when you get Kevin Durant.
Well, I guess I don't know if I totally agree with that. Like, Kevin Durant left Golden State because it seemed very clear, one, he had accomplished what he set out there to do, and there seemed to be some pretty real friction with Draymond Green and company. There was always going to be question of how much credit he was going to get. And so after that, leaves and goes to Brooklyn with Kyrie, where that thing breaks up because of Kyrie Irving. It was less winning and more the circumstances and situation that have been created outside of his control. You could maybe argue that going back to leaving Oklahoma City to go to, in the first place, but that was in quest of that first championship. So this one's the most curious to me because you got a great opportunity for Kevin Durant. You're getting up there in years right now too. And there doesn't appear to be an agitator. Like, it's been a while since we've had to engage with Bradley Beal meaningfully, but he doesn't seem like a guy that's got that Kyrie potential to blow this thing up. Neither does Devin Booker, who seems like he just wants to chuck up shots and hang out. So it does seem like they could have some semblance of stability as we march into this new apron era of the NBA, where eventually the financials will catch up. I saw they've now, I think, committed to these three guys have something like $750 million in guaranteed salary tied up on the books. So that could come into play. But personality wise, it does seem more stable than what we've seen with Kevin Durant in a while.
So in 2 years, if they haven't reached their potential, haven't even gotten to the Western Conference Finals or won a title, you think Kevin Durant's going to hang around? Now, again, his deal is 3 more years. He's under contract this year for 46, next year for 49, and then 25, 26 for 53. I guess I get the drama side of it. I'm not now talking about the winning side of it. You know, if they're not winning, if they don't put this thing together, does he end up looking for another team? I don't know, because again, you know, he is starting to get up there in age. He's 34, so by this point you're talking 36. So maybe he will just stay here, but I don't know. I get the drama part of it. I understand that. Now I'm talking about the winning part of it, because he's still not changing teams to find less drama. He's changing teams to still win a title.
But I guess that's my thing, is it's more been about the circumstances around that have led to them not winning. It's been the drama in those spots. I don't necessarily think it's always been Kevin Durant just being like, well, it's not going well here, but there's nothing else wrong, so I'm going to leave. There's always been another circumstance that sort of forced its way into the conversation for him. So that to me is the only difference. But you're right. Maybe the priorities change later on in his career, and we'll see. Dad, the other interesting tentacle to this was the Miami Heat factor, who were the other team that people thought might be in on the Bradley Beal sweepstakes that, according to a lot of reports I saw, never really made an offer that was going to top anything the Suns made, which is saying a lot because that wasn't a steep offer. And did it under the guise of wanting to go after Damian Lillard, though we saw the other day a report from Shams on the Pat McAfee show that apparently Damian Lillard wants to stay in Portland and wants that team to get better. Now, we didn't hear that from Dame himself, Dad, but that, if you're Miami's, got to be a pretty big shot across the board if that was your offseason plan coming off this finals trip here. Is any part of you surprised by this from Dame anymore at all, or are you surprised that we keep going after it?
No, I mean, you keep wondering when Damian Lillard's going to say, you know what, okay, I've had enough. It's time for me to move on. He's, 32 years old? And everybody keeps talking about how they appreciate and respect what he's doing. So I guess it all comes down to what he feels about it. Does he feel good about this? Because if his career ends and he never wins a title, he'll go down, with the Moses Malones of the world, the Charles Barkleys of the world, as some of the greats to not win an NBA title. And then how does time look at that? When Dame Lillard's name comes up down the road, is it, yeah, but boy, he stuck to his guns, he wasn't changing teams? Or would it be better off to change a team and go get a title? You want to get a ring. Is it at the thought of you leaving the team that you said you wanted to stay with to get better when it's not getting better and it doesn't look at the West right now. No one thinks Portland's going to be one of the top teams. Let's see what they do in the draft, but is Lillard even there? So I don't know. It comes down to personal preference of you want to be known as just, that one team guy.
I want to weigh the scales of the Damian Lillard situation because I think his more than any requires us to really put ourselves in his shoes. Dad, the Damian Lillard situation fascinates me to no end because, again, on one hand, we've got what is likely a very disappointed Miami Heat crowd if this is true and Damian Lillard does not want to be anywhere else but Portland. And I went back and looked at his likes on Twitter because that's journalism in 2023 and did notice him like a tweet from a while back. This was earlier in June, basically saying that Damian Lillard in an interview prior to that had said and been asked the question about when the 2024 season starts, will Damian Lillard be in Portland? And he said yes. And the rest of the tweet insinuated, but everyone's going to run with some CJ McCollum quote about his future. So Dame has been trying to tell us for a while he does not want to leave Portland. The question becomes, is that any sort of indictment on him as a competitor? Because I can say comfortably, he's not going to win a championship in Portland. We saw their best shot in 2019 when they made their one Western Conference Finals appearance. But at this point, they've made it abundantly clear over a long stretch of time they cannot or will not put together a team around Damian Lillard that's willing and able to win a title. And so with that knowledge, and you could say, hey, Dame probably believes any team he's on is capable of winning a championship and all these things. But at some point, is it you know better so you got to do better? Or is there part of you, because there's part of me that appreciates this guy understanding he's got a pretty good lot in life. He is rich, respected, and comfortable with his surroundings, right? He's a guy who's been paid max player money in his career, has been one of the best, was respected enough by his peers to be a part of the NBA All-75 team, despite never having a championship, never having an MVP. I don't even think having finished second in MVP voting in anything ever. He's got Dame time. Everyone loves watching him play, and he is largely recused from the weird championship conversation, the rings or bust conversation that we have around most NBA superstars, because he's weathered the storm and stayed. So, Dad, when you look at it like that, he's got a pretty good gig, and willingly wading into any other water would seem like something most of us would say, hell no, why would I do that too?
So, I mean, again, it's your perspective of how you want to look at it. You know, if you're a fan, you want your guy, you know, if you're a Portland fan, obviously you'd like him to stay there. But they've had since 2012, since he got there, year after year after year to sit there and try and get better. So for Damian to say, I want the team to get better around me, dude, you've been there a long time. One Western Conference final, and I agree with you, Mike. They ain't getting to the finals, and they're not winning it in the next few years. Again, he's 32 years old. So what do we think of, and you're saying, let's put ourselves in his shoes. Does the word satisfied come into play, where he's satisfied with where he is? Now, it makes it sound like he should want more, right? He should want to win a title in Portland. And we're saying, Dame, you should see the writing on the wall. It's not going to happen there, even though your confidence level says, I can be that guy to help bring this, you know, the city a championship. But then there's the other side that says, man, you're a competitor. Do you want to go win a ring? You might have to go somewhere else to do it. So it depends on what side of the fence you're on. But the word satisfied, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, if he's been his whole life, you know, his whole career in Portland, if he likes it there, I've said that all the time. What motivates a player and or a coach to move somewhere if they have the chance to? Is it geography? Is it family? Is it ring? What is it? Maybe he's happy there. Maybe he just enjoys it there. Maybe he's satisfied. Is that a bad word? Is that a bad word in professional sports to have your professional athlete who has not won a ring but not move around to find a ring say he's satisfied? And again, I'm just putting myself in his shoes and just throwing this one thing out there. I don't know if that's his thought process, but would it be so wrong for a player to say, you know what? All good here. I enjoy here. I like my life here. It's been here. I'd like to finish with this team. I'm fine with whatever happens.
If you were in his shoes, would you do the same thing? Would you stay the way he has?
I have always wanted a ring. And to me and my team sport, you know, that's now again, in my career, I didn't have choices when I left. I got released. So it's a lot different than these great players. But there is part of me that would, if I had accomplished what he'd accomplished, you know, the all NBAs, the all stars, you've basically accomplished everything but a ring. At some point, I would say I want to be part of a team that gets a ring. But again, you want to be a main part of it. I remember, you know, my teammate Seth Joyner, who, you know, we were phenomenal in Philadelphia, and the guy was an all pro and a Pro Bowl player. He moved out after, you know, Buddy left, and through the Kotite years, guys split up after free agency. He ended up winning a title in Denver. I don't think he thinks a whole lot of that because he wasn't a huge part of it. You know, I got to run for the 49ers in 94 before I retired, and they didn't sign me. It was in like week 12. they didn't sign me, but if they did, they won the Super Bowl that year. But I can honestly say it would have been nice to have a Super Bowl ring, but I would not have been a big part of that. So there's winning a ring and being a major part of that, which certainly Damian Lillard could still be, but maybe he's just satisfied where he is right now.
Yeah, I look at Damian Lillard more like Reggie going and winning a ring with Green Bay when he left your guys' Eagles team. Like, if he went down to Miami, where everyone thought was going to pursue him, with Jimmy Butler and the Heat team we saw this year, they're instantly one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference next year, knowing everything we know about Dame and what he could bring to that backcourt. So I think that definitely would be the comp. And you're right, knowing it's right there, you're the final puzzle piece in what looks like a championship outfit and culture already in Miami. That would be pretty hard for me to turn down if I was in those shoes. Again, I'm not ready to use it as an indictment of Dame, the competitor, but if I'm in that case and you're looking at Miami, that seems like a pretty fun place to win a championship if you've got the opportunity, given what that team's history looks like. So I would probably bite on that hook if it was presented in the water in front of me. We'll have plenty more time to get to this NBA news as the week continues to go on here. But, Dad, I mentioned the U.S. Open was going on out here right in my backyard. Not too far from me was also the Elite 11, the top high school quarterback prospects in the country, coming together in El Segundo, California, to go ahead and sling the rock and give us a little preview of what we got coming forward. So to talk more about that, we have 24/7 college football and recruiting analyst Bud Elliott joining us now on the podcast here. Bud, what's going on, man?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, it was. I think I would have rather been at the U.S. Open, but it was still fun to see kind of the future of college football out there.
Yeah, it had to be pretty interesting. So paint the picture for us for people that have never been to this. You've got the top, obviously, 11 quarterback prospects coming up in the high school class here. What were some of the names that you were most excited to see going into this weekend? Some of the names that most college football fans were most interested in.
Sure. So they actually invite 20 because I think they don't want to make anybody feel bad for finishing 11th. Like they don't want to imply 11th is last place. So they'll put the final 11 out there because you're still dealing with high school kids, and they're all on some level they're all good prospects. As far as the guys that had that really early impact potential, Dylan Raiola, Georgia commit, former Ohio State commit. That was a serious battle. Nebraska was in there, USC, basically the who's who of college football. And he looked really good, right? Now, he didn't win the MVP. I think we had him second on 24/7 Sports. But as far as the next level tools, he looks as physically developed as the college counselors they had back at the event, right? Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, those type of guys threw the deep ball well, seemed to know where to go with the football. It really just didn't have any true down days. A kid out of Carlsbad, California, Julian Sayin, who's an Alabama commit. I was not completely sold on him going into the event because my only exposure was at a 7-on-7 in Miami where I thought he was just kind of okay. But Greg Biggins, our West Coast scout, has been saying this kid's a stud. The release is lightning quick, decisive, knows where to go with the football. And I thought he had more arm juice. So I was kind of down on the kids Bama took last year in quarterback recruiting. It looks like the Tide really have one now. Those were the top two coming out.
So, but what are some of the things they do? Because I always, when everybody starts to get blown away by kids throwing a ball in shorts and a T-shirt, I've been one of these man, sometimes we go a little too far. So what are some of the other drills or things they're doing to show their skills?
Sure. So I think that's a great question. They try to evolve the event. If you look back 20 years ago, first Elite 11 stuff, there were a ton of busts. Recently, they've been pretty good. C.J. Stroud was the MVP, Bryce Young was second, that type of stuff. So they try to do a lot of drills that expose different weakness in players' games. So for some guys, that might be the ability to throw on the move. For some, that might be how quickly you can make decisions. I know they also put them through the S2 testing, right, that they were doing for the NFL draft. You guys remember all the kind of commotion that caused for the last year's NFL draft. The first night is really a drill station. They'll put them through the high-speed camera work to evaluate the efficiency of their delivery, both in terms of ball speed and in terms of release time, but also how efficient it is. The second night is a scripted 20-throw pro day where they really try to hit all possible weaknesses in your game to see how you do it, and also to see how do you struggle mentally if you miss a throw or two. Do you start to press? Can you reset? Can you play with some tempo. Day 3 is an accuracy challenge, and then the ability to play 7-on-7, where they bring in some of the better receivers, but also some of the better defensive backs in the country. And for that, like that, to me, I feel like, being good at 7-on-7 is not a sign that you're going to make it. If you're legitimately bad at 7-on-7, going back to like just racking my brain, there's not a lot of guys who have been terrible at 7-on-7 who ended up being really good. I think that says something. You need to be at least competent throwing the football when nobody's rushing you, right?
Yeah, I think, we kind of see that statistically borne out when you make that jump from college to pro clean pocket throws, right? What you do when no one's around your feet, what you're able to carve up when you've got the most ideal situations there. So it's understandable. And you're right. It's so much more comprehensive. Dane Christ, a former teammate of mine, I was just talking to him the other day about those early Elite 11s. And he's like, yeah, we used to just, get a phone call and it told you were invited. Now this is a circuit, like you said. There's a whole way that guys have to earn their way into the back leg of this trip and ultimately get to this point. Going down, I'd be selfish if I didn't ask, but obviously we got a bunch of Notre Dame fans that listen to this podcast. CJ Carr, Notre Dame commit, also a part of the event here. Tell me, was there good news out of this? I saw some good buzz around him, but what did you see from the Fighting Irish hopeful?
Yeah, so I've seen Carr twice in the last 6 weeks. I saw him here in Orlando at OT7, where I thought he made a lot of high-level throws, and that's something that continued at Elite 11. Like, Carr was a little bit up and down at times, but I thought the ups were really up. And, man, like, that's kind of what you want. You're going to bet on your coaching staff to have those ups show up more often, right? And have the downs show up less often. But you really want to see that high-level ability, and you don't want to see the misses occurring for things that maybe are less correctable. Like, I don't want to see the guy show up and have him actually be 5'11" when his huddle profile says he's 6'2", right? I don't want to have him have a huge hitch or kind of have his motion devolving into like a Byron Leftwich looking thing. So, ultimately, I thought Carr looked strong. We had him squarely in our top 5 or 6 from the event, and that's, you're upper quartile there. So I think Notre Dame fans should be extremely excited about CJ Carr. He showed up at some big moments too for his high school team.
So the one quarterback, and I guess he has to be a quarterback if it's not a nickname. When your name's Air Noland, there's no other position for you, correct?
Dude, he's been super productive in high school. 4,000-yard passer in Georgia. Obviously, like deep playoff runs. He's getting bigger too. Like the last time I saw this guy, I don't remember him being that filled out, and he's kind of looking more like a college kid now. The release is lightning quick. I think the arm strength is enough. Ryan Day needs to be really excited. I know they lost out on Dylan Raiola, but Aaron Noland, if you want to say consolation prize, is a ridiculously good consolation prize. He's certainly a top guy for us.
You mentioned Dylan Raiola, obviously the crown jewel here. And a lot of people, the way they talk about this opportunity with Georgia, acting like, all right, well, now Georgia has gone to these back-to-back titles. We kind of always make these comparisons to the beginning portions of the Saban dynasty at Alabama, where, we feel like they've done it largely without having to have a future NFL player at quarterback, even though, we had that whole thing happen early on there. So, but when you look at the Georgia quarterback room and what this could potentially mean, how big of a shift could this be for them? How important is this for the next step of what Georgia hopes is a Saban-like dynasty?
I think it could be huge because let's say maybe you don't have that defensive line depth for a year. Maybe you don't have 2 lockdown corners, which would be kind of a surprise for Georgia given how well they have recruited that position. But maybe you have a year where the quarterback really has to carry you, not just be one of your better players, but what if he has to be your best player? I think Dylan, his ceiling certainly is a guy where he could be the best player on what is typically in the last couple of years the best roster in college football. I will say, though, talking to some guys who cover Georgia out there, they think Georgia's going to get 14 or 15 guys drafted, and that Carson Beck, who's presumed to be the starter this year, is going to be one of those dudes. So Georgia may have like another NFL draft pick quarterback already, which kind of ears perked up at that a little bit.
Hey, Bud, with all these elite quarterbacks in you're around, so over the years, how has it changed with conversation really off the field, and how much do you hear of talk of the NIL money going around with these guys?
So basically, everybody's going to get some kind of NIL deal. I think the major change is like last year, we had heard about some of the huge deals these guys got, and I think The Athletic had a couple of stories, maybe ESPN had a couple of stories about the size of those deals. This year, we're not really hearing just how big those deals are. Obviously, the Rashada deal with Florida that fell through. They're certainly still getting them. I think the money has shifted somewhat to the transfer portal to where the more experienced, more proven players are getting a little bit more. But the very best quarterbacks are still getting paid. Let's not fool ourselves. That's the most important position in the sport, even though I love linemen, but offensive tackle will be 2. Quarterbacks are still far and away number 1. They're still getting it. I think they're just keeping a little closer to the vest, which may not be a bad thing. Because if you're out there as the $1 million a year guy, that's a lot of pressure on you as a 17, 18-year-old kid.
It is. There's a lot that comes with it, and I think this process with Elite 11 is sort of emblematic of just how professionalized the process continues to get for young players coming up in a way that is so different from even a decade plus ago when I was getting recruited. So it's a different world, but thankfully, Bub, we got people like you helping breaking it down and helping feed it to the rest of us. So we appreciate it. Thanks so much, man. And as we get closer and closer to college football season, hope we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it, guys. See y'all.
Thanks, Bud.
Awesome. Again, check out Bud Elliott. Does a great job covering college football recruiting over at 24/7 Sports, also part of the Cover 3 pod with our bud Tom Fornelli also. And, Dad, it was funny. So when I knew we were going to have Bud on and talk about this, I did talk to our buddy Dane Christ, who was a part of an Elite 11 quarterback class back in 2007, 2008 that had some studs in it. And he said, he's like, there wasn't this elaborate process that got you over there. It was you got a call, you went, and it was much more of a hang than any sort of real labor-intensive foray into quarterback play. So it really is the perfect sort of marker for what college recruiting and the college system has become for a lot of young players now.
Oh man, it is. I mean, it's obviously done a 180 on where it is right now. It's crazy how much it's gone on or what has gone on with it. The Dylan Raiola really kind of struck me because I have a little bit of a connection. Noah's dad, Dominic Raiola. Dominic Raiola, for those that don't know, was one of the, what's the right word to use?
Dirty. He was a dirty player. And I say that lovingly as a former offensive lineman who flirted with the line. Dominic Raiola was what Joe Flacco was to the elite conversation. Dominic Raiola probably was to the conversation about, is this dirty or not?
This dude, I did his last college game. Nebraska played Northwestern, I think in the Alamo Bowl, and it was a bloodletting. And I mean, what Raiola was doing, him and that O-line to that defense of Northwestern was amazing. And I saw Dominic at the Super Bowl, and it's just so wild to see this guy who the perfect way I can describe him is you'd love him if he was your teammate. You hate him when you're playing against him. That was Raiola. That this dirty, gritty, and I hate using the word dirty, but this line stepping offensive lineman who would block you to the echo of the whistle and maybe more, turned out the number 1 recruit in the country. Not number 1 quarterback, at number 1 recruit, and he's a quarterback. He's at the most skilled position that there is. This dude would be taking a snap from his father. It's just so wild that the position difference here. But Dylan, he's right in the place I live in, Scottsdale. He's like 15 minutes from there, from Pinnacle High School. So I look forward to keeping an eye on him. Looks like one hell of a prospect. But we all know with all the names we just thrown around, Mike, that what's the percentage of A, which guys bust, and B, which guys are not with that original team they committed with, in the next year or two when they hit the transfer portal.
Yeah, well, and I mean, listen, Kirby Smart's known kink of turning away high-talented quarterbacks in favor of lesser ones. See Justin Fields before, but you're right. What it's become is, hey, you're a quarterback room. You stockpile as many of these guys as you can. You get the best one of the bunch on the field, and then you understand that you're going to probably have to recruit more because, like you said, the portal has offered these guys a chance to go play elsewhere. All right, let's finish this thing off with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into your day. Dad, as you protest right now, what's going on?
Well, I feel I have to do it like a PTI show when they do the errors at the end. I just want to correct something I said when I talked about guys who did not were great players and didn't win a title. I said Moses Malone, and I meant Karl Malone, Karl and Charles Barkley when we were talking about Dame Lillard. So just wanted to make that connection.
There we go. Errors and omissions, courtesy of our agent Lou, who texted us both. Now that we've got that cleared up, let's get to this, that, and the third, because we want to be a show that honors and has integrity for information. These are 3 quick stories to finish off your day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us a 5-star rating. Let us know more of what you want to see. Dad, let's go to the College World Series. Among the many things that we wanted to get to at some point today. It's been a ton of fun. I've watched a bunch of it after not watching any college regular season baseball. But the real show in Omaha is what goes on at Rocco's, the Jello shot competition that we talked last week with Stephen Scott Shock about. Good Lord, I'm going to learn to talk at some point here. The Jello shot board at Rocco's across the street from the College World Series. Every year, a competition among the fan bases at the College World Series to see who can consume the most Jello shots in the entirety of the tournament. The record had previously been set by Ole Miss, but Dad, records were meant to be broken. And this year, which should surprise no one, LSU has broken the record the other day, hitting a mark of 21,000 Jello shots. And Dad, the way they did it is worth note. Todd Graves, who's the CEO and founder of Raising Cane's Chicken, also, in breaking this record, set the Guinness World Record for the most shots ordered in a single round of shots by ordering 6,000 Jello shots. For the fans there, as he tweeted, he broke the record, a Guinness Book of World Records record for a round of shots, set by Merle Haggard in 1983 when she bought 5,095 shots for the entire bar at Billy Bob's in Texas. So congratulations to LSU for doing the thing that we all expected you to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's no shock that they're leading this thing and leading it by a ton. I mean, over almost 12,900 shots. Next closest is Wake Forest with 5,100. I mean, it's almost embarrassing to the other schools, especially like Virginia and Stanford, who are barely over 500 and 600. So, and again, just so everybody understands who doesn't know about this isn't the players doing Jello shots. This is the fans.
That would be sick,
shots.
though, if the players were actually going out and accomplishing.
Yeah, you get some interesting baseball if it were the players doing this.
And the money raised by this goes towards a charitable donation to a local food bank also, so it does a bunch of good. It's fun, healthy competition. But, Dad, you're right. This is just as much about celebrating LSU as it is about shaming Virginia that lost to freaking Stanford. Chris Long, Macon, Caroline Darney, all friends of the program here. I don't know how you guys are going to look this program in the eye anymore. If there was relegation in college sports, I would call for it here because you can't lose to Stanford in a Jello shot contest. There's got to be some bit of pride in that program's fan base about this, and it just did not show up to the College World Series. So great shame on them.
Yeah, there is. At some point, you Virginia fans have to look at the board and you have to see it and say, okay, we have to step up. And you had nobody step up. That's the shame of it all. You didn't have the fans there that stepped up to seize the moment that said, we can't be here. Not only last, but behind Stanford as well. So, yeah, that's a double whammy for the least amount that you did. And nobody had the gumption to step up and say, you know what? I'm going to take care of this. If nothing else, just get us past Stanford so we beat them and we're not last, but it wasn't done.
You're either coaching it or allowing it to happen, Virginia. Either way, no bueno. Dad, let's get to that. We mentioned there was no Ja Morant news in the NBA, sort of. So we had the 25-game suspension handed down. It sounds like the NBA PA is going to appeal that and try and get it less. But from Tim McMahon over at ESPN, we had heard, and he said, quote, I've heard indirectly that Ja and people close to Ja, perhaps formerly close to Ja, have this feeling that the NBA is out to get them, that the media is out to get them. Now, Dad, I want to take this with a grain of salt because it sounds like a bit of a game of telephone from one to the other. But if that's even close to the sentiment coming out from Ja's camp, we should not expect anything to change about his situation after these 25 games or anytime soon.
Ja, again, you're right. If you just take it from what we're reading from this, that the only change Ja is going to make is enough to get him back on the team and playing again, and maybe not in a position to get nailed again and suspended again, because that's what we're looking for, right? Everybody, Ja put out the statement of how sorry he is and blah, 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 which we are all allowed to go, blah, 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 blah. We don't care what you say. It's about your actions, not your words, which is, he's not the only one. It's in a lot of cases when people say they're sorry, say they're going to change. That's all well and good, but until you do it, I don't want to hear it anymore. Show me, don't tell me. So we're going to have to wait and see. And then it's always, when somebody puts out an apology or something, is like, was he sincere? Was she sincere when they did that? Again, actions will speak a lot louder. But yeah, if already, and if that is true, that it just feels like the league is out to get them, that's not starting this thing off too great. We'll see. I don't know if the suspension is going to go down. Maybe it will, because technically it was 3 times more than the first suspension of 8 games to 25 games. It's a touch over, 3 times more. Maybe it will get lowered some. We'll see.
Maybe it will. We will see. Dad, let's get on to the third. That is the most important story in the world right now. I don't feel like that's hyperbole, as we have got a missing submersible near the coast of Newfoundland, near the Titanic. Over the weekend, a submersible, so not a submarine, it is not anything registered or validated by any sort of governing body, made a trip. It is courtesy of a company called OceanGate Expeditions. Took 5 people in a submersible metal tube on a quest to go and visit the wreckage of the Titanic. What we've got now is a situation where the submersible lost contact about an hour and 45 minutes into the dive towards the Titanic. The Titanic is 13,000 feet underwater, and this crew and ship have enough life support, including oxygen, for about 96 hours right now. Dad, being lost in a tube that is about the size of a large MRI machine underwater with 5 people in close quarters is about the most hellish thing I can imagine. We certainly hope somehow, against all odds, that these people can come back safely. But Dad, $250,000 a head got you onto this submersible. There's apparently a British billionaire and adventurer on this submersible as well, all of whom signed up willingly for something that seemed to have a very low probability of success.
First and foremost, I mean, all you can do is hope for their safety. And as each hour passes, it just looks more grim. It's just such a, that's the horrible part about this. But to agree to go down in this thing, they showed it. It looks, you said it, it's like an MRI cylinder that you sit in, and it's basically run by a gaming control. I mean, they were showing the insides of it. There's not much to it. I would have looked in that and said, wait a minute, we're going down over 2 miles in this, which has not been approved anywhere, for something like this. I'm stunned that these people were looking for an incredible adventure, I guess. And again, man, you hope this can end up a great story or a great ending. I don't know if it will or not, but I can't believe when they showed this vessel how much there wasn't to this thing that was going to go down over 2 miles.
The CEO of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, said in the news clip that's gone viral explaining this process, he goes, it's like an elevator. It shouldn't be difficult to do. My brother in Christ, some things should be difficult. Some things should require technical prowess to do, and going 14,000 feet deep in the ocean is probably one of them. One of them that shouldn't be is downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure you do it. Make sure you check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel as well. Thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Go. Boom. Money in the bank.